Chess Kids, you've come to the right place. You're in ChessKid YouTube land, a place where you can eat all the chocolate you want and never gain weight. Wait a minute. No, that's my dream. You're a kid. You never gain weight when you eat chocolate. Must be nice. All right, let's have some ice cream and let's get into it. Today's video is all about not losing. In fact, I'm calling this video Just Don't Lose. I'll be honest with you. I played this on one of my live shows, Beat FunMasterMike, against somebody who I think already beat me once. I played Future Bus and I was getting totally beaten again. Just take a look at this position. You might have thought, oh, FunMasterMike, you got the board upside down. Clearly you were white. No, I was black. I was down 3 pawns for nothing. And my main goal was just to not lose. Now, should I lose? Of course. If white plays correctly, Future Bus should drive that bus right over FunMaster. But I just kept putting up resistance. And this is one of those skills that it's kind of hard to teach because I can't really show you a video and say, hey, black to play and draw, because clearly black should not draw this position. My goal is to show you that if you keep giving obstacles to your opponent, you keep stopping, the quickest wins, sometimes good things will happen. Now, will it happen every game? Of course not. But if you mentally give up, or if you physically click the resign button, or if you're playing a real game, if you tip over your king, clearly you have no chance, okay? All right, enough talking. Let's get into it. So my opponent, the Future Bus, has 3 different pawns that he could promote. 3 passers coming down the board. The first thing I did was I tried to give him a little bit of something to worry about. I played the move h5. And after h5, I have some sort of plan of like pushing my pawn to h3. And after the king takes, maybe my rook taking, maybe my king getting here, and maybe, you know, annoying the king. I could at least sort of envision a checkmate. Now, if you can't envision a checkmate, I'll see if I can do that for you. If white just continues pushing pawns and completely ignores everything I'm doing, which I would not recommend, okay? White just pushing this pawn down the board. I'll give check. Now, you can clearly see if the king goes backward, I might take this pawn and, you know, maybe create some sort of checkmate one day. And if the king takes, well, in this position, I'm thinking about grabbing this pawn. And now we're getting a little close to something special happening. For example, if the pawn moves forward here, well, I don't know. I could take with my king. I could take with my rook. And if the king moves here, well, I'm thinking about checking with the pawn. Now, white should probably still win this kind of position. But, you know, maybe I play the move rook here. Uh-oh. Things are actually getting a little scary for white in this position, don't you think? Yeah, because if white realizes he's going to get checkmated, well, you know, this move might save him. It might, but it might not. I've got some rook takes pawn and g5 checks. But if he plays king here, well, in this position, I could probably push my pawn. And then if he promotes a queen, and then I give check, and the king moves, and I take. What is that? It's mate. And you know what? I have this funny little rule. If I can at least envision a checkmate in a chess game, I never resign. Like, in this kind of game, I was like, well, you know, I could see me organizing my pieces in such a way that there's checkmate. And so that's literally one of the reasons that I did not resign. Now, none of that actually happened, but I'm trying to show you that after I played the move h5, I was thinking I had some ideas. Now, my opponent played a4, okay, and I played h4. You see me going for this, but my opponent correctly realized that there was no rush. So white played h3. Okay, well, you know, there goes that plan. So you might think, okay, FunMasterMike, it's time to resign now, right? There's no checkmate. There's no hope. Well, I thought, you know, let's just play a few more moves, okay? I played rook to b3. Maybe I can grab one pawn and disconnect the remaining pawns. And, you know, my king's a little bit closer to the action than the white king. My king can move here or here. So I'm just, you know, I'm just making moves, just seeing what I can make happen, okay? My opponent guarded the pawn to keep the 2 connected pass pawns. Then I played rook a3. Now, white could play rook c4 and try to guard everything, but then the rook is stuck and my king will walk around. So I don't mind this decision by white to just play d5. You know, give away one pawn, get your pawns going, okay? I could take on a4, but I got my king to f6. And then after f4, I grabbed one of the pawns and my opponent played the move c4, clearly winning. 2 connected pass pawns supported by the rook. Time to resign, right? Let's play a few more moves. I played rook to a3, just so if the king moves, you know, I might grab this pawn if the king tries to circle back to the center. And then we had some checks. Okay, I moved my king. The pawn moved. Okay, now if that pawn goes any further forward, there could be a problem. I decided to stop it. And after c5, I'm just kind of wasting time here, waiting to see what my opponent plans. Okay, the rook moves down the board. My next move was just a waiting move. I'm waiting to see how white's going to beat me. Rook c7. I played rook d3, keeping the white king out of the game. Rook to e7. Okay, my king went sideways. Now the pawns can't push. If this pawn moves, I win the rook. And if this pawn moves, I win this pawn. So I'm just playing some moves. I'm just stopping the immediate wins. All I'm trying to do is survive. Rook to e5, king f7. I'm just waiting for my opponent to find a winning plan. Rook e3. Now you know not to trade when you're behind, so I played the move rook to d5. Rook to c3. Okay, now I've got a serious problem. If this pawn moves, even if I take this one, the pawn moves and I lose. So now it's just crisis time. I just have to prevent the immediate advance of the c-pawn. And my only way to do that is to move my king around. Now if my opponent pushes this pawn, I'm going to move my king here. And if my opponent pushes again, I'm going to play king here. And it's not quite losing yet. I'm just barely surviving. So my opponent did play c6. I played king d8. Okay. And my opponent decided to push the d pawn. Okay. And in this position, c7 is the threat. And then c8 queen. So I had to play king here. All I'm doing is not losing right away. My opponent played king f3, which is fine. I can never actually play rook here and take the pawn because after the rook trade, this pawn promotes. So I'm literally basically stuck. And all white has to do is figure out a way to organize getting his king in the game. So I played rook d4. All I can do is just waste time. Not exactly a fortress. Okay, rook to d3 check. King went back to g2, but I couldn't really take this pawn. So I'm not really sure why that happened. Rook to d4. Rook to e5. Uh-oh, guess what? After rook to e5, it's actually a draw. White got a little bit frustrated here, could not figure out a way to get the king in the game, and by losing the c-pawn, it was immediately a draw. After rook to e5, I took, and now the d-pawn is clearly a goner. After rook check, I took, and my opponent took. Unbelievable. All I kept doing there was making sure there was no immediate win, and kept believing that by playing more and more moves, maybe my opponent would not find the win. Now, on this point, you might say, okay, FunMasterMike, after rook takes f4, rook and two pawns, everything's on the same side of the board. Clearly you offered a draw, or your opponent offered a draw, and you accepted because you survived. That's the whole point. Well, yeah, but you know what? Another endgame idea is that if you can't possibly lose an endgame, you are what we call playing for two results. You're either going to win or you're going to draw. In this position, I thought, you know what? First of all, my opponent might still be frustrated by not winning that position. And secondly, I'm a little bit better here because white's king is stuck to the f-pawn. My king's a little bit further advanced. My rook's a little more active. And I decided, let's just keep playing. I have no risk. Okay, so it would have been one thing to just say, okay, didn't lose, take a draw, but now I have to readjust my mindset, which is a hard thing to do in chess. Okay, now we're on move 51, and I'm just going to tell you, I ended up winning, but it took me 65 more moves. White made a couple mistakes, but it's really hard to defend in a blitz game on ChessKid when your clock is running down. But anyway, cue the theme music. Maybe we can play Cool Like the Chess Kids while this is playing. And here we go. All of these moves. I got an extra pawn. I did not win incredibly efficiently, but our final position, I finally promoted. And then I did the king and the rook checkmate. So that doesn't happen every game, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 100, where you can come back from a completely losing position. But sometimes, chess kids, you just have to not give up and good things will happen. If you like more of FunMasterMike's YouTube secrets, click the subscribe button. Is it there? Is it there? I don't know, but find it, click it, and you'll be sure to see all of my new videos when they come out.